Poor old Idaho, man. They're taking the hits, aren't they?
What's up, SDS Nation? Idaho sure are taking the hits, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Guess what? It is Great Scott. Time for your True Crime Fill, a show so good it comes to you every single week. You know these best guests by now if you've been watching Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime. Today is a prime example of why. Guest number one, wearing the actual Magnum PI Aloha Hawaiian shirt, is America's most respected detective, Fil Waters. He spent decades in law enforcement, becoming an expert at obtaining criminal confessions. 23 of those years working as a homicide detective in the Houston PD, investigating more than 400 homicide cases. He's also a Marine and the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations. And as if that is not enough, he starred in the show The Interrogator. Agent Scott Duffey is director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. Scott is a retired FBI supervisory special agent of the Wilmington, Delaware Resident Agency. What that means? He was an FBI agent in Delaware. And prior to the FBI, he served 5.5 years as a Pennsylvania police officer. Man, look at this. I got the two best looking guys. One is in the Hawaiian shirt, Scott Duffey, who is a professor, and now you know why. Look at him. He's got the bow tie, looking fantastic. So not only the best guests, the best dressed guests. I love it. Stu says, can you put the names up? We tried doing it. My chief technology officer, a.k.a. my wife, is running around with a child that's not feeling great. So we'll get that figured out, and we'll get it up for you for the next show. BW, Brian Williams. I'm making it up. Hi from Fort Worth, Texas. This will be good. It is always good. Hello from Boise, Idaho. Glad you're checking in because we will be talking about Lori Vallow Daybell, as well as Bryan Kohberger, the man who Phil does not like to say his name. He refers to him as the evil doer. BW points this out, and Phil just said this as we were starting the show. Idaho has a lot going on. That is definitely for sure the truth. So let's get right into it here. It's amazing for a tight gag order. A lot of information still seems to be coming out about the evildoer, Phil. And one of the things that we are learning this week, shockingly, is that he likes to watch himself. He, of course, is accused of this quadruple murder in Moscow, Idaho, and according to reports, is now obsessively watching news coverage of himself behind bars as he awaits trial. This is according to a report from the Daily Mirror, which does break news time to time. They say he has his own television with his very own remote control that's separate from the other inmates, and he's allowed to soak up hours of daytime TV, and somehow he is watching a lot of information on his case in the Latah County Jail. First of all, Phil, I did not know you got a television set with a remote control in a county jail. Does this sound normal? And secondly, does it surprise you that he is watching himself, if that is the case?
Well, this is the exact reason why I do not refer to him by his name. And he will forevermore, for me, he will be the evildoer. And if I never speak his name, it'll be too soon. So I am not surprised if this is true. Again, I mean, these are things we're hearing, of course. But if it is true, it doesn't surprise me a bit. I think this is just another indication of the type of person that he is, personality that he is, the narcissist that he is. And I hope he's enjoying my commentary if he happens to be watching this particular podcast.
Scott Duffey, it goes on to say, and this is a direct quote from a source inside the jail, quote, he watches himself all the time. It's really kind of bizarre. He does not share a jail cell, so he is allowed to pick whatever basic cable channel he wants simply by asking a guard. So I guess the guard has the remote. I don't know. By asking a guard to change it for him. Have you heard about this in county jails where they have their own TV set, a high profile defendant sitting in a county jail?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I have heard of a few people who have, you go through the commissary, and if you have enough money on the books, you can buy a small little 13 by 13 TV. And but is he watching it from his cell on this TV he purchased, or is it probably would surprise me that, if he's in the common area and watching on the big screen, and that somebody like him is able to take control over the remote control. I know in my house, I don't have control over the remote control. I know what happens if I try to get control. So, yeah, I know inmates have their small TVs if they purchase them through a commissary, but having control over the remote control in a common area, that'd be interesting.
By the way, Shannon Wagner writes, what about the merch? I will have to defer you to my chief marketing officer, a.k.a. my wife, who's also my chief technology officer. She is working diligently on it. We are trying to find the very best store to get you guys some cool STS merch, including hats, shirts, stickers, magnets. Maybe we'll get one of Scott and Fil in a bow tie and Hawaiian shirt, like little bobbleheads. That'd be awesome. So the options are endless, and we will have it up, I promise, and I will let you know. Please follow me on Twitter at Podcast STS, or you can follow me on Twitter at Joel Waldman News if you want to get my commentary about how much I hate most news correspondents, anchors, and also a little UFC fighting stuff mixed in there. I'm a diehard fan. Jeanette Deaver writes, love your show. Been watching since Bryan Kohberger. Thank you, Jeanette. Don't say his name in front of Phil. And this comment here, look how kind everyone is on a Friday. You guys are the greatest of all time. Followed by Julie Frew. It's a happy Friday, everyone. Awesome shirt today, Phil. Followed by
thank you. Mahalo.
Yeah. Followed by Julie Frew. No, followed by Joan Russell. Yay, good afternoon, gentlemen. And then we've got Missouri in the house. And I'm not Irish. I totally forgot about this, but Scott Duffey is. That's why he's wearing the bow tie, I guess. Happy St. Patty's Day, y'all.
According to Ancestry.com, I'm 19% Irish.
You are?
Yes.
Well, happy St. Patty's Day to you, too. And, of course, a happy St. Patty's Day to my 7-foot friend, Shaquille Oatmeal. Moving right along here.
Can I say something here?
100%, Phil.
Scott talked about being able to buy a TV in the jail if you got enough commissary. Do they do that in
Delaware?
Where you are? In Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Pennsylvania, Delaware, yeah. It costs a little bit. So when we've moved inmates from one cell to, or not one cell to another, but one prison to another, especially if we took somebody out of the state prison and then put them into
they
federal
get their
custody,
own little TV?
they would ask, hey, are we able to bring our TV? So it all depends. Federal system, no, but in the state system, yes.
The great Northeast, the liberal, the left coast in the Northeast section of the country, and letting these convicts and inmates buy their little TVs. That's amazing. So
yeah,
and maybe that's something they do in Texas. I'm not aware of it. If it is, normally it's in a day room and you got a TV set and they get to watch whatever everybody votes on to watch. In terms of the evildoer, my thinking is that he's in isolation. And that's why he's got access to his own television set. But I would be curious to know if anybody knows in Idaho if the inmates are allowed to purchase a television set for their own viewing pleasure. That's something I've never heard of before. Learned something new today, if that's true.
I never want to be in prison, but I definitely do not want to be in prison in Texas. That is for sure. I'll tell you that. Catherine Regier writes, "Wow, love it, Phil. Happy Aloha Friday from Maui."
Oh yeah, aloha.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, mahalo.
I don't understand this comment, but maybe Phil does. Hi, Dad. Love Abby Taha Waters. Is that someone who is related to you, Phil? Is that your
Uh,
daughter that you don't know about, perchance?
it could be. There was someone on here that wanted me to adopt them. I don't know if that's her or not, but
That that,
it may be.
that could be it. We find out about the evildoer and Phil's illegitimate children on this show. Mitzpah writes, "Hello from the UK. Joan, again, happy St. Paddy's Day. We'll be sure to have green beer." Moving along here. So, even more information on the evildoer. Phil, when he's not vegging out in front of the tube, the boob tube, as they call it, with the rabbit ears, the evildoer, according to you, the name you use for him, has reportedly turned to God in jail. He is attending weekly prayer sessions with a pastor. What do you make of that? Is that a sign of remorsefulness, repentance, boredom? What do you make of it?
Well, only he knows that what the motivation is behind that, and if he is in fact doing that, I think that is good. That's good for him. It's not going to absolve him of any responsibility for what he is to have alleged to have done. And there's an opportunity. Look, my church here in Texas, we have a retired Army colonel who is big into prison ministry. I have a friend of mine on the Big Island who is also involved in prison ministry. So these guys are given opportunities to be exposed to faith and make a decision on what they want to do about their eternity. And I can tell you there's one thing that's unique about that prison setting, and especially people that are on death row. And most of us do not know the day and the hour that we're going to leave this earth. Mm. And those guys are going to, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to get a date when they're going to understand this is it. We're done. They've rehabilitated 5 in Texas so far this year. And every one of those people, they not only get a last meal, whatever they want to eat, but they also get the opportunity to speak to a minister, a pastor, a religious person in whatever particular religion or denomination they may be in. Now, if they choose to speak to a Christ-following pastor, preacher, that type of minister, then they have the opportunity at that moment in time to determine their eternity. And at that moment in time, no matter what horrific thing they've done that's put them in that place, they have the opportunity to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior and know that when that stuff starts to flow through them, that once it happens, they're going to be before the throne and they're going to be forgiven and their eternity is secure. Now, there are, and a lot of people, I've talked about this in my Sunday school class, and a lot of people kind of have a hard time wrapping their minds around that. But here's the deal. I've talked about on this show before. Joel, you asked me, what's the big problem in the world today? And I summed it up in one word, and that would be sin. So there is no sliding scale on sin. I'm just as guilty of sinful behavior if I'm gossiping at the coffee pot as the guy who's about to get juiced on death row.
Phil, have you ever witnessed one of these rehabilitations in person? Have you ever been there for one?
I have not, and I'm awaiting to be invited to one. It was a cop killer who I obtained a confession from, and his brother became an HPD officer, and I became very close to the family. And they have told me that when that time comes, that they would invite me to the execution.
And you would go?
Oh, I absolutely would. Sure.
Really? Wow. That must be, I wonder if they, I mean, I wonder what kind of disclaimer / warning they give you ahead of that this could affect you, moving forward in life. I want, is there, did they talk to you about that before you witness one of these?
Well, they talk to anybody that is there, and I can tell you, and the detail that is used to bring a person to death row, strap them down, and all that. Those folks rotate on a pretty regular basis, because it is a significant event in anybody's life to sit there and witness something like that. So there is going to be some sort of, for lack of a better term, there'll be an orientation as to what they're about to witness and so forth. So as best as one can prepare for something like that, one has to understand that if they have agreed to witness this, that they have in some way, they've kind of resolved that within themselves already. But yeah, there's
and Phil, the guys on death row, and I guess women too, maybe. Are they? Do you know? Are they basically in a solitary confinement type deal till they are rehabilitated? Do they sit in a cell by themselves all day, every day, with just a little yard time here and there?
Yes, I think I mentioned that maybe last week, but yes, they're in their own individual cells. They get out 1 hour a day to go stretch their legs and do some push-ups, and then they're back in there.
I just don't know. To me, that's worse than the alternative, which they're going to face. But anyway, I don't want to get. I was having a good Friday. Don't want to depress myself into a bad Friday. Papa Bear writes, "Hello all from Moscow, Idaho." Good old Papa Bear, a friend of the show. Meanwhile, this is a first for the chat. I need more of these. This is an actual question. Stoos writes, "Do you think the evildoer knew he'd be caught and unconsciously wanted to be?" Scott, anything? I know you're not a psychologist, but you're almost one as an FBI agent. What do you think?
That takes a lot. So subconsciously, right, wanted to be caught.
By the way, Scott, look at this. Melissa Seamock. Bow ties are cool. I love it. Go on. Except on Tucker Carlson, then it's not cool. But go on. On Scott, it's very cool.
Yeah, especially as we hear more and more stories, and if they come out to be true with him watching himself on this TV and all the, the fanfare and so forth, I would say, first and foremost, he, having chosen to go down this road and with his preemptor topics of, hey, I want to see the psychology, build up research of an individual that commits a crime. And there's research, there's determining information, finding out the information and trying to make a best decision, right? We all do that in our lives with everything before us and our experiences and morals and so forth. But to go down such a deep, dark path, I don't think that he was looking to get away with it. I think he was looking pretty much for what has already taken place. He's caught and now gets to see and have a front row seat at his own, all the information leading up to, including if he chooses to go to trial. So, yeah, no doubt in my mind.
Sounds like he's going to be obsessed with more, watching himself if this does go to trial. Sensory Combustion writes, best dressed guess. I have to agree with that. Carrie G, Phil, I often wonder if the evildoer intentionally left so much evidence to prove his intelligence by Houdiniing his way out of this, which he wasn't able to do. What do you make of that?
Question his intent of doing that. I think, given the eyewitness
Ooh, he's freezing up there, Phil.
testimony, is anything, what little we've been told, and again, I'm just going on what we've been told by this eyewitness and what was in the search warrant. I don't get from him at that moment in time that he was thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to leave this stuff around here because I'm so cool. I'm somehow going to outsmart all this stuff. So I think he went into it thinking he was smarter than anybody else in the room. But I think now the results are that because some of the stuff he's done afterwards would look like, I think I read the thing about when they served the search warrant on the parents' house. They were in there with little Ziploc baggies and putting stuff in, No, I don't think this guy's, he certainly, he ain't, I knew Houdini and I loved Houdini, and the evildoer ain't any Houdini.
Catnip writes, good morning, gentlemen. Finally caught a live show. Bobbleheads, I am so in. We will eventually make that happen. And then we've got Dina, hello from the countryside, not of Ireland, but of Kansas, which is equally as beautiful, with 1 inch of snow overnight, quickly melting. Get out of Kansas, move somewhere warmer. Scott, to you, this is, again, a direct anonymous quote in this paper about the evildoer, and it says, he sits down with the pastor and receives his own private mass. Another jail source told the Daily Mail. It's just the two of them, and no, I have no idea what they might talk about. Number one, your thoughts on him, having this private mass, and do you think this is sort of, I don't know, enabling this sense of entitlement that we seem to be hearing about, the fact that he's getting this kind of one-on-one attention?
I would agree with what Phil was talking about. It very well may be he's that in some sort of isolation, and so thereby there's no other way to go about whether he receives his Sunday service or going to mass at whatever, So if he is in isolation, I would imagine he would be afforded all the same privileges, right? For anyone that has petitioned the jail and to be able to receive services, to receive whatever amount of TV he's watching, and then of course having nobody else to fight over remote control. So it's it ultimately, if the reports are correct, just as Phil said, everyone has that opportunity to redeem themselves, and whether taking that opportunity to do so for his own redemption, as opposed to somebody who goes into jail and all of a sudden finds the Lord simply to manipulate the system and get some things. So I guess the jury's out on that.
WW Equestrian Center and Exotics writes, it's smart, by the way. You get a free plug for your business when you put your business in there. In Illinois, inmates can buy TVs, but cheap, see-through, and they can take it to every prison they go to, followed by Emerald Eyes. Hello, gentlemen. Joel, this is the best show on YouTube, and love these two gentlemen. They're the best. I've learned so much from the guests on your show, listening from Royersford, PA. Have you heard of Royersford, Scott? That's your neck of the woods.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to a concert tonight with friends from Royersford near Collegeville. So yes.
What concert are you able? Is it Guns N' Roses? Who are you going to see?
I'll probably say their name wrong because it's Steel at the Keswick Theater. So a little plug.
Steely Dan. Blue Bear Arts writes, morning from Boise. What's going on, Idaho? You guys are having a rough go at it. And then we've got this from Stu's. Phil, not Gil. Phil, your shirt always makes me want to take a vacation. Love the bow tie. Have a weakness for a man in a bow tie. Watch out, Scott. Scott knows what he's doing here. So he is apparently a model inmate too, Phil. Since his lockup in January, the evildoer has been a model inmate, spending most of his time alone and refusing to react to harassment and name-calling from his fellow prisoners. Does that surprise you that a guy like him would not, necessarily take the bait if they're chirping at him, he's not taking the bait, he's keeping his head down and, doing his thing by himself? Does that surprise you?
Well, Ted Bundy was a model inmate. So that's probably all I need to say, right? The fact that he finds himself in a situation where I would have no doubt that he's in isolation. So he's well known. Everybody knows who he is, and those guys are going to harass him, and he's kind of earned that. He's put himself there, and so the fact is walling himself off and ignoring all that stuff. I am sure what you've got to maintain your own sanity. And so, I'm sure he's probably on suicide watch. I mean, there's a lot of things going on there involving him because of the notoriety of this thing and the fact that he's taking mass, which would indicate one thing, that he's Catholic, and number two, that he is afforded that opportunity, as he should be. So they're just not going to, because of who he is, because of the notoriety, I'm just assuming this now, just from what I'm hearing, and based on this type of case, they've got him in isolation, and they don't want him getting hurt. They don't want an Epstein thing happening here, right? Where he just shows up dead in his cell, and nobody can really explain why or how it happens. So I'm not surprised at all that if this is true, if that's what the behavior is at this point.
We did an interesting show with some ex-cons who served hard time, and that's what Julie is referring to here. When you did the ex-con show, Larry Levine, who's often on television, he has a prison consulting business. He said a TV was like a babysitter. I forgot that he did say that, and that's interesting. Scott, this is also interesting. From Hoosier Mean, 1993, word is the evildoer has lots of lady fans sending him loads of love and dollars. Let me tell you a little Joel factoid here that no one knows, I don't think. I grew up playing tennis with Lyle and Eric Menendez. They're from New Jersey, the guys that murdered their parents. I think. And it happened in 1989, and they've been in prison since then. And then when I was a young man in my 20s, I started seeing them on the news all the time. They had woman after woman going after them. They both got married in prison, and I was a free man on the outside living in New York City trying to find dates. And I said to myself, what's going on here? These guys are in prison getting women. I'm on the outside, and I can't meet a woman. What is the deal, Scott, with these women who are attracted to men in prison? And by the way, I've had BTK on here, the serial killer, the infamous. I've had the daughter, Carrie, on, who's become a friend and is a wonderful person. Same thing. She says a lot of women are attracted to her father. What is the psychology here, Scott? Again, you're not a psychologist, but you might as well be one.
Yeah, it's time and time again we hear of any serial killer, any notable criminal that's locked away in prison for either forever or for a very long time, that they get all this fan mail. It's one thing to have people calling or people writing in as a pen pal, maybe trying to pique their own interest. Hey, what made you do it, and so forth, and are you sorry? So there's a lot of curiosity surrounding them. But first and foremost, when you start dating somebody in prison, you know where they'll always be, right? They're never going to run out on you. So that's a sure thing when you know where your man always is. And so it's it's a phenomenon, but it is history has proven time and time again that it's there's quite a few out there reaching out for all these very harsh serial killers. Even as I've followed up a lot on Son of Sam, how he has become a Lord follower and changed his ways, so to speak, and does a lot of preaching in jail and through all his pen pals. But I don't get it.
It's and again, I think that's why people are intrigued by true crime. There's all these like strange elements that people just can't make sense of, can't understand. J Flo, not to be confused with J Lo, says hello from Newfoundland. That's a cool place. Followed here by another viewer, STS Nation, Old Woodworm. That's a great name. In Ireland. So hello to you. Fil Waters. Another thing we are learning is that, you see him on the telly, speaking of the TV set, and he doesn't look like a scary guy necessarily. He just looks like a guy. And the reason I bring it up is, according to the sources, the quote unquote toothpick image on TV, in person, he apparently is quite imposing with an over 200-pound build. Phil, when's the last time you had to take someone down in the street, and do you still think you could take down the evildoer if you had to arrest this guy, Phil?
Well, you mean today?
Right now, Phil.
Well, I can tell you this. When I was younger and a harness bull out there running the streets, I had a philosophy, and it was, all these turds are 18. And I had to stay in shape to stay up with them and do what had to be done if we got into that kind of an arrest scenario. Now today, and in those days, of course, I could run, I could shoot, I could do all that good stuff. Well, today I am just relegated to shooting. So if today he gave me a problem, he would have to be able to, I guess, dodge 950 feet per second.
How's your shot, by the way?
How do I shoot?
How is your shot? You have a good shot?
You talking about?
Yeah.
Shooting?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I still, yeah. In fact, I have my little friend right here on me at all times.
At all times. When you leave the house, it's with you?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm fascinated by police. Maybe that's why I'm doing this right now. So moving right along here, Scott, meals. He is getting this vegan diet, and we are finding out precisely what sort of vegan diet. He's getting vegetables or rice and beans. That sounds like it could get old really quickly. Scott, I don't know why I'm giving you all the psychological questions today, but how do you, by the way, Phil, Abby Teja, I am the adopted daughter. She is, and he just lost Phil. Anyway, I guess Phil had to run away. He was too fearful to hear this. But Scott, how can you go in life from just, there's so many amenities in our world today. There's so many good things that make living nice. How do you just drastically switch and change and adapt to a life that is brutal, with these horrible meals, crappy conditions? How can you stay sane in a place like this, especially knowing you're probably never getting out? It's one thing if you're in there for a barroom brawl, you spend a few nights, but a guy like him, if he goes to trial and is convicted, has never seen the light of day again.
Yeah, isn't that something that's for me and for anyone, I think, that values their freedom, so difficult to understand that somebody has done something, made a choice to do something that they know, regardless of whether they think they're going to get caught or not, are going to land them in jail, and all the freedoms they ever enjoyed are gone. But I've come across quite a variety of criminals, people who have thought about what prison is like, people who have been homeless for one thing or another, have committed crimes, and then find themselves with a roof over their head, three, we say squared meals, and at least a TV and some other form of workouts or entertainment. But I don't know how somebody like this guy and others, where, even though they may be struggling, as Steve has talked about in his journalistic reporting, when he went to Pennsylvania to see that, seemingly so, had a good upbringing and afforded all the possibilities of what life could offer. But still, it's one thing for example, for me to have gone into 2 police academies, and especially in Quantico, where you really, yes, you have some great food and whatnot, but there are a lot of freedoms you give up, and you're living that for a period of weeks, and then you come back out to the real world. So for me, it's still very difficult, having been in prison, to drop off prisoners, pick up prisoners, to interview prisoners, to see this lifestyle is just something that is a constant reminder to say, wow, I can't imagine anyone that wants to be there, and can't imagine anyone that has had a life of freedom and made a choice to all of a sudden be put there, regardless of the type of meals, whether you're given rice of your choice or whatnot. You're right. I mean, 2-3 items. It's scary for me. It's something I would never want to see the light of day with going into a prison cell.
And Scott, what about the younger guys, especially, when you were, dealing with all the drugs moving around, and you catch these guys who are maybe 18, 19, 20, 21. Do they not have a sense at that age yet of like repercussions and the fact that, you get caught and you're going to do time? Was it just like a naivete?
I think it's a combination, Joel. So, you have your 18, 19-year-olds, which I've dealt with plenty of times, but they've been through the system, in and out, juvenile systems and whatnot. And but they haven't really had a taste of any length of time. And if they see 6 months, whatever it is, they look at that as a notch in their hat, a feather in their caps, where they feel like they've been emboldened and can come out and get their street creds. I think as I've dealt with older 20s and 30s and have been in prison, a little easier to deal with, a little more fearful, and so thereby are looking for, hey, what's a deal that I can get? And those individuals are easier to deal with, because they know what they're looking at, and they've enjoyed what they've had on the streets, and whatever their drug of choice, their dealings and whatnot, have brought them quick dollars, and they spend those just as quick as they get them. So they've had that high life, and they know that going into a prison, they're going to be losing all of that. So it's quite a few different types of people, and I think in having dealt with particular ones, those who have been through the prison, and I could see that it wasn't a good experience for them. That's something I could use to my advantage.
And by the way, Fil is trying to get back on. He's having some technical issues. I saw his picture kind of cutting out. It is 2023, but the technology still needs some help. Sharon Lynch writes, Kentucky allows personal TVs. They are clear plastic and bought through the commissary. And then Blue Bear Arts, she has all the bases covered here, from California, now in Idaho, have a son living in Finland. You got multiple continents, and you have Idaho in there, obviously the epicenter of some of these very high profile cases. This is another thing that kind of caught my attention, Scott. And this is LehighValley.com, which is in your neck of the woods in Pennsylvania. is working on some sort of documentary alongside of Law and Crime, and they were speaking to people that knew Bryan Kohberger, and a person that knew him very well said, and I'm quoting here, he would have been indistinguishable from any of the other college students, young adults, recent college graduates, or graduate students going around the Lehigh Valley. And the person continues, at the time, I would never have said, oh, yeah, that guy would do something like this. He may have been a little odd or a little off, but other than that, you'd never expect to be allegedly part of a quadruple homicide. The last name of this person is Ferraro. What about this conception, Scott, that a serial killer or someone that can do something like this looks or acts a certain way? He's back, Phil. Hello.
That was not so I'm sorry about that. That was not a technical issue. I'm helping support a couple of private investigators from California who are on a surveillance operation. So I needed to take care of something for them.
Best thing about Phil, he's doing the work while he's doing the podcast, and I love it. He's doing surveillance stuff. But we are talking about, Phil, and I just asked Scott this question. There's another report basically that was done with LehighValley.com and Law and Crime. They're doing kind of a documentary on Kohberger, and someone said, I would never have thought this guy could have done that. So my question to Scott, which I'd like you to answer, Scott, is it a misconception that a real bad guy is going to look or act a certain way, Scott?
It is a misconception, and I think that's where people are not, not in tune with their situational awareness, right? They're looking for somebody that just looks out of place and that's running at them and has everything written all over them saying, hey, I'm going to rob you, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to do all sorts of vile things to you. I mean, it is, especially as we look at serial killers and this constant, I'll call it a fascination if you want to call it, coin a word for it, but they are people that are ordinary, right? They hold down jobs. They seemingly have these ordinary family lifestyles, going to church, going to school, going to your grocery store. And so I think we are taken back when something so brutal happens and then we see the face of the person who has done it, and they seem to be everybody that we walk among and walk with and not fearful of. And we continue to, I mean, it's interesting that people are continuing to be shocked by this. I don't know what they're looking for with maybe going back to a Charles Manson type day where this is an individual who broadcasted everything and had the look, had everything about where if you saw them on the opposite side of the street, you would get further and further away from them, as opposed to the people today that we're seeing. It's, you had a conversation with, and all of a sudden the next day they're arrested for a terrible crime. So it's not shocking, but we continue to be shocked by what we have seen. And yeah, I agree with this individual. It's an everyday occurrence, and no exhibitions of prior violent acts other than maybe some drug addiction issues and social awkwardness.
Frankie Figs writes, narcissists never think they'll be caught. Phil says, a different Phil, hello from me, Indiana. What's going on, Indiana? Phil, by the way, the name of Phil's company, Kindred Spirits Investigations, this would never happen. But if I said, hey, Phil, I think my wife might be up to some funny business, I want you to track her. Do you do that sort of thing?
I do. Not my favorite thing. Divorce cases are the worst things that I ever get involved in, and I don't particularly like them, but I will do them for a price, It's not.
By the way, everyone, listen to what he just said. This guy has arrested capital murderers, the worst of the worst, and he says divorces he doesn't like to do. How ugly did they get, Phil? This is my show. I can go right off the tracks here. I'm curious about this.
Well, there's always two sides to a story. And, you know, people, they get married and, you know, they just don't get along at some point in time. And I always hate to see marriages break up. I always do. I mean, my wife and I mean, we've been married for over 40 years. And
love to hear that.
My
parents have been married 63 years.
Well, we've had those moments. I'm sure your parents, you know, I mean, it's everyone. Just that's what's
there hasn't been a
about,
single
right.
There has not been one day in 63 years where this woman has not yelled at my father, and God bless him, he's in a nursing home now. She still yells at him. Anyway, let's go on.
Well, you know, I mean, so when it gets to that point, and more times than not, it's the women who their attorneys have told them, call Phil, and here we go. And child custody cases, I mean, a whole bit. And number one, it's disturbing in one way that I will do what needs to be done, and their expectations are unrealistic because they've been watching way too much television to begin with. And when it comes down to, because I do a lot of surveillance, and I'm trying to explain to them that ain't cheap. And I work with them. I mean, but I'm not the benevolent PI that's just going to go out here and do this stuff for free. I mean, that's the way it is. So there's just so much animosity anyway. And then you kind of become their therapist at some point in time. And I mean, it's just not my favorite investigation. I'd rather go out and get involved in a premise liability case where a capital murder occurred on the property, and here we go. So it's just they're not my faves. Not my faves.
Yeah, they can get ugly. Catherine writes, I'd buy a bobblehead of Phil in that vintage Aloha shirt. You know what? So would I. I'm gonna have to get some bobbleheads made. Someone actually sent a bobblehead of me and my mother, and she has it in her place, and I love it. Thank God for And Room, because she gets us back on track. I get to ask Fil and Scott random law enforcement questions all day long, but I won't. We should do that one day, though. The time frame for the Idaho crime, Scott, appears to be incredibly tight. Minutes. What level of frenzy could induce such a behavior? Not sure I completely understand the question. I guess how he could get so enraged and do this in such a short time frame. That's what I'm reading. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, so let's pick this apart a little bit, because think about it. You have a DoorDash delivery somewhere within minutes, if not. In my head, I have to believe that the evildoer is watching. He's set up. He's not parking and running in. He's set up just like he did the many months leading up to this event. And so you have a DoorDash delivery. That's not something that's planned. He doesn't know it. And so this DoorDash delivery takes place literally within maybe seconds of all of a sudden him entering. And so that to me, that's amazing. And so then to enter into the home, now you're already set up for whatever you plan to do. And this is not something that happened overnight, as the affidavit has shown many months leading up to. I only have to imagine that it wasn't just a planned break-in or something. This was something on his mind. And so there's a lot of thought that goes in, but then of course there's a big difference between planning, fantasizing, and then actually doing it. And so yeah, it is mind-boggling, isn't it, for every one of us, even outside of those who have investigated and been part of investigating, but to think of, wow, what does somebody be pondering and thinking, and then to actually do it, and what's your mindset? Yeah, it's such a tight schedule, but this is something that looks like it has been well planned, and maybe he goes in intending to do one or two, his target, and then as Phil and many other experts talked about, collateral damage. In other words, okay, I didn't quite think there would be that many people in the house, but just to I think when we see video of the car looking and driving and turning and doing 3-point turns, he's setting up to complete this long awaited fantasy. But then you see the videos, etc., and hear about the stories of now a high rate of speed. So, he was taken back, and not everything that he had put into it, where he can just do a slow drive, get away. Now his heart rate is racing, and he is fleeing in hopes of not being caught. So it is amazing, and I think as we get closer to more trial dates and whatnot, or hearings where more information will come out with the evidence, that I can only imagine a lot more video exists.
DeCalo DK says, hello from Cape Town, South Africa. Shout out to DeCalo. Love to have Cape Town in the house. I will take this question since I'm a former media guy. How are the press getting so much inside info? The short answer is they develop relationships, and they're on the phone a lot, and they start to talk to people, and eventually certain people will speak back to them. The issue here is, if I was still in my cable news days or network news days, we would not really be reporting a lot of this. If you notice, most of the media outlets are like the Daily Mirror, People Magazine, and I'm not slighting them, but they don't necessarily have the quote unquote standards of, let's say, a NBC News or an ABC News, where you have to have multiple sources speaking to you. A lot of these are single sourced pieces of information. And so they are running with that. There is one cable news channel, which I won't mention, that is running frequently with single sources that might be directly connected to the anchor herself. But we wouldn't necessarily be able to run with it. But there's always ways to get information out of people, even when it is not supposed to be funneling through. And to be honest, that is a job of the media, to get information out, but you just have to be responsible about it. But again, if there are stronger ethics, tethered to the news agency, usually they will require you to have multiple sources to actually run with the story. So I hope that answers your question. Followed here by Carrie G. Do you think there's any chance he will simply confess, Phil, with everything that is stacked against him, or will he even want to watch himself go down in flames at a trial? Your response, Phil.
Well, this is just pure speculation. I think that once it's determined, and I don't know that it has yet been, other than by inference in terms of who the defense attorney is and what her certifications are and qualifications are, that if the death penalty is on the table, then I would think that would be a bargaining chip to be used to get it off the table. So, and that would be walking toward a plea that this thing never goes to trial. He simply comes out and says, and again, this is pure speculation on my part, that he comes out and says, look, I did it. Here's why I did it. Because there would have to be some provisions for them to take it off. So it would have to be a full disclosure about when he started planning it, when did it start, why did he do it, who was he targeting if he was, and what were his feelings, I guess, or what was he going through at the time that he was doing it. So there would be a lot of stipulations to make that happen. But that would be the only thing I could see that he would possibly come out and be full disclosure about it, of what he's alleged to have done. And if that's good enough for the DA, if that's good enough for the prosecutor to remove the death penalty from the table.
Phil, by the way, you jumped off right as Abby was commenting that she is in fact the daughter that wants to be adopted by you. She confirmed that. She confirmed that, and she said, will the evildoer's phone calls be recorded and available to the public when the gag is lifted? Scott, do we know that? In general?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
Those phone calls are being recorded. They got nothing to do with the gag order. Those phone calls in prison or in jail, they're recorded. So anytime he gets on that phone talking to anybody, they're recording that stuff. And I tell you what, I've used that. I'm going to tell you that is a great investigative tool. You get those people chatting it up, they forget that, and they're told. In fact, I think there's signs in the jails that says this is being recorded. So it's like, I guess your public school education didn't quite cover that part of the vocabulary, but so
I think she was wondering though if it would be released, because I guess right now they're not being released.
No. They're not going to release anything now.
Yeah.
The only time we're going to see if that possibility, if anything comes as a result of those phone conversations, will be at a trial.
This is an interesting question. Back to the psychologist who's not a psychologist. From Mitzvah, what is it that makes a person able to kill, Scott?
Phil?
We've already answered that question, Joel.
You've answered it.
Yeah, my answer. It's sin. That's it.
Yeah.
Anybody's capable of any act under the right set of circumstances.
By the way, I need to introduce you to Fil LaCroix, Fil Waters. Fil LaCroix was my photographer. You guys are similar in age at Fox News. One of the greatest guys I've ever known. And I call him Uncle Phil. So you're my second Uncle Phil here. But you've said, Fil Waters has said that any person under the right circumstances at the right time can commit this grievous sin, including, he said, this lovely woman here. Anyone can snap. But so we've heard it from Phil. But Scott, we haven't heard it from you. What makes a person able to kill?
So is this a 5-hour program?
It can be if you want.
Now he's going to get professorial on us.
Yeah.
Now you've unleashed the professor.
I'll dip into to my, I would say, my spirituality and so forth. I totally agree. Go back to Cain and Abel. It's as old gets, and there's no law, but yet. What do we learn? That Cain killed Abel and still knew innately that it was wrong. Nobody. That's So there are motives, right? That law enforcement investigates. It ranges from anything to anything, but to name a few: revenge, passion. Good old-fashioned rivalry, jealousy, all these things that exist, and I totally agree with Phil that ultimately good old-fashioned free will, and you get enough.
Drugs, and money.
Sex,
drugs, or money.
Money. Yep.
Yeah.
It's just any one of those can, for but a moment it takes for your mind to say, I'm doing it. and you do it. And the culpability can range from level of absolute, I'm going to get that person. I will absolutely plan it and I'll have no issues doing it. And then, of course, they do it. And then they're like, okay, it's not maybe the way I thought it would act or think of afterwards. But I always say the same thing. Any one of us is capable of anything if we let ourselves get to the point of actually fantasizing about it and thinking of a plan, as opposed to good old-fashioned road rage, which is a momentary lapse of judgment, and then you quickly grab the wheel and tell yourself, don't do something so stupid. And then there are those that actually, fulfill that unimaginable act and kill somebody. So,
Phil, we always hear. I got you there, Scott. That was well said, eloquently said, as expected with a bow tie. But Phil, we always hear this: how come they just didn't get divorced? Speaking of your surveillance, you always hear, how come he just didn't get divorced? How come she just didn't get divorced? Why did he or she have to kill the spouse? What's your answer?
That's a great question, Joel.
Thank you.
I watched these cases. In fact, I was commenting on Court TV about the Florida case with the Microsoft exec that was murdered, gunned down. They've arrested the guy that actually fired the shots. They've arrested the husband of the ex-wife who had divorced him. And that wasn't good enough. So and this has gone on for a year, and they finally arrested the husband of the ex-wife, and I'm sure they're angling for the ex-wife as being part of this conspiracy, and it was over child custody and that kind of thing. And these guys and these gals that plot to have their spouses killed, what I'm always amazed about, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised about them doing that. You ask, why don't they just get a divorce? Because they don't want to get a divorce, because they are, again, sex, drugs, or money. There's something going on here where the divorce is not going to satisfy their particular need. And so we've got to go to the extreme to take care of that. And what I'm always amazed about it is that these people do this repeatedly. We're always reading about these kinds of cases, and they think they can get away with it. That's what is amazing to me. It just baffles my mind when you're sitting there and these people, and then some of these folks, whether it's the husband or whether it's the wife, I mean, they're sitting at you and you're explaining to them, and you're talking, at least when I've had them in the interview room, and when you start that conversation, they're looking at you like a calf looking at a new gate. I mean, they're just, what? And it's always been interesting to me about the dynamic. Of course, I'm asking I've asked that question. So why did you think this was the solution? You've brought about a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And why? Why did you choose this path? And like Scott's talked about, look, emotions, love and hate, the two strongest emotions that we feel. And as intense as love is at the beginning of that marriage, it eventually turns into the same intensity, and maybe more so at the end of it, when they see it's going down the tube and they begin to hate. And there is no way to conduct your business. You cannot do the wrong thing the right way.
Mic drop right there. Remember that quote. Can't do the wrong thing the right way. On to Jen Till here. This is an interesting comment. Any advice for the evildoer's neighbor who's having a hard time? The guy stated, maybe if we didn't avoid him, he was odd, he would not have done this. I mean, Phil, you can't change a person, right? I mean, this guy was going to kill people just because you might have been not friendly to him, you can't go there and blame yourself. They say this could be a form of survivor's guilt, but ultimately it is that person's responsibility. Am I right, Phil?
Correct. And I don't see whoever that neighbor is. I think he's maybe a little caught up in his own importance.
And we're going to pop over in one moment for just the last few minutes onto Lori Vallow Daybell. Phil's running his surveillance, and it's
That's
Friday.
okay. Don't worry about that.
But Emerella writes, "Hi from good old Germany. Hello, Emerella. How are you? Scott, over 60 search warrant applications filed by the Moscow Police Department have been unsealed in just the last week, including 6 seeking information about the sale of a K-bar knife. Apparently, information was sought from the following 5 retailers: Amazon, Walmart, Blue Ridge Knives, K-bar Knives, and eBay. There were separate applications submitted to eBay. Is that a lot of search warrant applications? I have absolutely no clue. 60 search warrant applications that were unsealed, Scott.
Yeah, and I imagine that it could be double or triple that. You're talking about, especially today's day and age. So these are your digital cyber world. So everybody gets a search warrant, right? So if let's say I get an IP address, and then I have to get a search warrant to figure out which subscribe or which provider it is, and so you're talking about search warrants for so many different paths, and so Amazon, you have a search warrant to Amazon, then you have search warrants for whatever might have been purchased, and then for every website. It's a lot that goes through, as opposed to a search warrant on a house. And a house you can spend many hours, and in this case, weeks in Moscow, but going through the dressers and going through the rooms, et cetera, et cetera. It's one search warrant. But in today's technology, it's a search warrant for every imaginable IP address, provider, subscriber, retail. So yes, that is a lot, and that is a lot that goes into, and then imagine all the search warrant returns that defiant that has to then take each one, whatever that piece of information. It may be negative information. Hey, thanks, but no thanks. There's no information here. So it's a lot of detail. It's a lot of time. And as Phil and I have spoken early in this, the investigation was just beginning when the evildoer was identified and arrested. It's amazing what goes into getting additional information.
This is so in the weeds, but I'm kind of interested, Scott, about this. So you're Moscow PD and you want to ask Walmart about something. You have to put together. How does it literally work? Is that search warrant then delivered to a manager at a Walmart? How does the process play out? I'm curious.
Yeah, so let's just talk about a Walmart or MoneyGram or anything like that. So I've executed search warrants many times at a retail location. First and foremost, I'm going to go, if a location is provided to me as a place of interest, I'm going to go and introduce myself to their loss prevention experts, right? These are the people that maybe walking the aisles looking for that retail theft. These are the people that are monitoring the surveillance video system. And so it's going to be introducing myself to them if I don't already know them, and asking them what capabilities they have in the store, and then asking them what is it they need from me. So early on in my career, it would be, hey, I don't need anything. Here's what you have. And then, of course, as we've grown into a more legally binding society and whatnot, then it's subpoenas and search warrants. And so ultimately it's sitting down with whoever I need to. And then that that loss prevention manager may introduce me to the manager of the store, and then finding out, oh, I have this much more to get surveillance videos out in the parking lot and inside and this and that. And then there may be records. So there's a lot of time and detail that go into just being able to figure out what that store may be able to provide me that would be useful in my investigation and case, and then getting the paperwork they need to cover them, to cover me, in order to bring that information into a courtroom.
By the way, do you guys both still have your badges? Do you get to keep like a retirement badge or something? How does that work?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got all my badges.
you do.
We don't need no stinking badges.
How many badges do you have, Phil?
Well, let's see. I've got one, two. I've got 2 badges with 2 different agencies because I was a detective sergeant at one and a deputy at one. Then I was an officer, a senior police officer at HPD, and was a detective, grade 3 detective. So, and then I work for a couple other agencies, and I've probably got 4 or 5.
And is there one in your wallet right now?
Yes.
It goes everywhere that your friend goes with you.
Yes.
And you too, Scott?
Yeah, so in the FBI, your original badge and ID, your credentials, are put into a shadow box, and so that's on my wall in my my office. And then you have the option, in which I did, you get to purchase a retired badge, and then the FBI provides you with retired credentials, so that way I can continue to carry my weapon as I see fit, and to be able to have that for forever.
There it is. There it is. And that's why these guys do not ever get speeding tickets, and why Phil drives a Ferrari. It all comes full circle. Eden, or Eden, depends how you pronounce it. Are we going to talk about Lori Vallow? We're going to talk about Lori Vallow right now for the remaining few moments before these guys basically just hang up on me. But for those who do not know, she is the Eastern Idaho mom accused of killing her 2 children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, as well as conspiring to kill her husband's wife, Tammy Daybell. She's been in jail since early 2020. The trial is expected to kick off for several weeks, so we are talking about it right now. And then this question from Kelly, not really a question, from Boise, wish we could watch Crazy Town Vallow on trial. Phil, as of right now, Judge Boyce in Boise is saying, it's from Eastern Idaho actually, is saying that the trial will not be allowed to be televised, and he is thinking of just giving an audio stream, which everyone will have to pay for, and a substantial amount of money, by the way. Something like, someone calculated it, and if you were paying and you wanted to watch, let's say, an 8-week trial, it would come out at like $6,000. What do you think about the fact that there will not be cameras inside the courtroom? Good, bad, or are you indifferent?
It will not be broadcast. Is that the question?
Correct.
I think that is a wonderful idea, and that judge is exercising great wisdom.
I knew Phil was going to say that.
Never been a fan of televised trials. What a disaster the O.J. Simpson trial was. The freaking judge becomes a celebrity. That whole thing. So, I mean, and they're performing to the camera. Don't think that everybody in that courtroom, and they know that it's been, even the Murdaugh trial, don't think for 1 minute that he didn't know that he's performing in front of that camera. I'm just am opposed to that stuff. I think the audio, no problem with that, because people don't really have a concept of just sound going out. So I don't think that broadcasting these trials, especially these high profile cases that are got so many moving parts, they're so multi-layered. This Vallow case is a disaster. I mean, in terms of just what she and this nut job cult leader did, or alleged to have done, and just her background. I mean, everybody in this thing, I think they've got 5 or 6 dead bodies around them. His wife is dead. Yeah. Her husband was shot by her brother, who died of natural causes later. And then you've got these 2 precious children that they're alleged to have killed. I'm telling you, that is the last place that you want to have is this thing being broadcast every day like it's a movie of the week.
But
So
Scott,
good job.
Scott, to Ann's point here, since the citizens of Idaho may very well be picking up a total tab of almost 15 million for the Vallow Daybell BK trials, surely they should have the right to see what they're getting for their money. Phil is shaking his head emphatically no, but Scott, no. Scott, it is not a public trial. By the way, best comment of the day so far right here from Carrie G. Scott has a soothing voice like Bob Ross. You should paint while we're doing this show. Scott. No, Scott, you don't think the public has a right to see this trial?
Yeah, I might differ from Phil here, but I do agree, or I can see his side. It is something that this is what's happening today when you have such a high profile case and it's aired on TV and it becomes a fascination, a sensationalistic. It becomes a piece of entertainment, and we probably forget about why we're there in the first place, and that is taking a trial step by step and seeking justice. And so in that regard, you want to continue to hold that sacredness. Federal courts don't do that, right? And so they continue to keep the cameras outside, and information that is provided to the public is provided by journalists who are able to sit in a courtroom, who are able to do their sketches, who are able to take all the information as much as possible and then publicize it. So I see that and I applaud that. However, I like some others, many others, where I'd like to see a trial as if I'm sitting there myself. And if I wasn't able to be a bystander who's waiting for a ticket, standing in line to enter into the courtroom, in some regard, I'm glad that I can see it from my couch. And so I kind of stand in the middle of this, where I like the option to see it and then to be able to make my own judgments, right? Wow, okay. And but at the same time, I stand with Phil in the sense that there is a sacredness to a trial, and this is the moment that everybody's been waiting for. That is the victims, and then of course the suspect who is on trial, waiting for their day in court, and not to be judged by public opinion, but by 12 peers.
And I'll tell you who's going to hate it the most: NBC, ABC, CNN, News Nation. They're going to despise it because it will take away from their coverage of what will be one of the biggest trials of the year. Miss Wee Lassie writes, this judge will have a ton of complaints given how the family friends can't guarantee admission to the court each day. It is ridiculous. Followed by, he is a relatively new judge here. Candy Temple writes, in my opinion, Judge Boyce is too inexperienced at this level of scrutiny. Papa Bear quoting Uncle Fil Waters here. Any of us could kill given the right circumstances. So Fil Waters, on a much larger 360 bird's eye view of this case, I mean, she's literally known as the Doomsday Mom. There's a Netflix documentary called Sins of Our Mother.
Yeah,
she basically thought that her children, were demon zombies and they had to be killed. Again, her husband winds up dead. Her new husband's wife ends up dead. The two children end up dead. The brother ends up dead. There are a lot of bodies piling up a la Murdoch. But just your 360 bird's eye view of this case, we asked this question yesterday in our show, and I will pose it to you. Is Lori Vallow Daybell mentally ill, or is she pure evil, or a combination?
Oh, I think she's evil. This is a woman who's, and the guy, what's his name? Grable? Is that his name?
Daybell. Chad Daybell.
Yeah, Daybell. There it is. Daybell. He's a cult leader. her background is all that kind of stuff, and she's talking about zombies and this and that, and they go to Kauai because they love Kauai. Of course, everybody loves Kauai. That's a wonderful place.
Yeah, she can't be too crazy if she loves
Well,
going there.
no, she's not. Well, no, there's a difference. We've talked about it before. There's a difference between being crazy and being insane. I just don't think she may be crazy, but she's not going to I don't think she's going to reach the bar of insanity, the legal bar of insanity. That is a very high bar. I've said it before. I just think that she's one of these people, and he became her Confederate, and they got together. They were drawn. It just goes to show you that there's somebody for everyone. So these two knuckleheads get together, and they're all caught up in the same kind of craziness. And they look at these children, and I think the little boy, wasn't he adopted? I don't think he was even her natural child, was he? And may have been on the autism scale. I mean,
yeah, he was autistic.
There's a lot of stuff going on there, and this is just a perfect example of a person who gets caught up in their own wants, and they want what they want at the expense of everybody else. And then she found herself somebody that was willing to go along with it because he's of the same frame of mind. So what ends up happening, these innocent people are dying left and are being murdered because these people are focused on themselves and what they want to continue to feed. You know, it's like the old Cherokee saying about the little boy that asks his grandfather about good and evil. And he explains it by saying that each one of us has two wolves inside of us. And we have one wolf that represents good and one that represents evil. And the little boy's question is, which one wins? And the response is the one we feed. So these are two people that have fed that evil wolf. And now they are reaping the consequences of what they've done. And they have, and what they've done to so many people has just reverberated. I mean, there are so many people like the Idaho killing that have been affected by what they did, by this act of evil that they committed, these several acts of evil that they committed. And it's one of those things. And back to the video and stuff, or the watching this on television. I'm sorry, you know, these are the same people that rubberneck on the freaking highway to see the accident on the other side and hold up traffic for 30 minutes. You know, I'm sorry. You know, the rubbernecking society doesn't have a right to view these trials. They're not the jury. And so, you know, I'm sorry. And no disrespect to you, Scott. I know, you know, you like to
Don't worry, Phil. I'll get the hate mail, not you.
And I like, look, when they're on, I will watch them for the purpose of commenting on them. But in terms of sitting there, now the O.J. Simpson trial I watched because the minute they showed O.J. walking around Brentwood there after he'd gone back from Chicago, we were in Hawaii at the time, and I looked at my wife and I said, "There's your suspect right there." So I'm just, you know, and that was theater. That whole thing was theater.
I forgot about the whole Chicago thing. That came up the other day. I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
So,
Eden writes, folks, would you mind hitting the like button? It does get the algorithm chugging. Please do that. Phil, this is a question that's interesting from Stews. Has seeing pure evil made your faith stronger? And then we'll get to Scott's take on all this.
Yes. That's the short answer. And my wife, at the end of my career, it was interesting because I will tell you, and I would tell anybody in my interview classes and so forth and so on, I would tell them, do not bring God into the room. And that's the mechanics of the interview itself, because I've interviewed guys that knew the Bible a heck of a lot better than I did. So I wasn't going to get into that discussion. But I say that to say this. I always prayed before I walked into the interview room because I knew I was bringing the light into the darkness. So if you look at John 1:5, it talks about, and the light shines into the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. And that was always the attitude that I had when I walked in there. And it was about building that relationship and reflecting my faith, reflecting what Jesus Christ was all about in order to get to the truth. And so it did over time. I think it made me stronger. And when I would have people in that room say something to me, and I didn't walk in there with the intent of doing anything, but I had a guy that had killed his 3-year-old little boy, beat him to death because he wet the bed. He disposed of the body. We never recovered the body. And I had him in an interview. I probably talked to him for about 12 hours altogether. And, you know, it's one of those things where I had him on the cusp so many times, but he was one of these folks that was not going to make any admission. Just wasn't going to. And when I finished talking to him, when I was done, I walked out of there and he says to me, he said, "Mr. Waters," and I turned around, I looked at him, I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I knew when you walked into the room that you were a man of God." Now I'm going to tell you something. That is pretty powerful stuff. And that's talking about the relationship I established with this guy. And I don't say that to make myself sound good. I'm just telling you that to answer your question, yes. When those little things happen, yes, it does. It just makes my faith stronger. It knows that I know what the truth is with a capital T and a little t. And that's what what I hope I reflect to everybody that sees me or listens to me, gets past me and gets to the truth.
Fil, some people unhappy with your thoughts about not publicizing the trial, but I'll have you deal with them on your time. Cindy Neufeld writes, "Charging for audio, etc. on such a high-profile case, I find myself asking, what are they trying to hide?" Scott, do you think they're trying to hide anything? I mean, they say that this judge is relatively new, relatively inexperienced, appointed fairly recently, and maybe the high-profile nature of the case has him a little apprehensive. I don't know. KCL is a friend of the show. She's on here frequently, especially when we're talking Lori Vallow Daybell, pointing out there is no insanity defense in Ohio. Andy School writes, having audio is better than nothing. We, the people, do have a right to see our court systems and process, but at what cost? That's an interesting distinction. Miss Wee Lassie, to you, Fil. I'm not a rubbernecker. I like to see how a trial unfolds, to see how each lawyer submits evidence and how they will get their point across, how a judge interacts, followed by a friend of the show.
My only response to that would be is, yes, you are. You just made an admission by denying it.
Marina says, what about the American freedom to watch the judicial system at work, Fil?
Really? Well, show me in the Constitution where that American freedom applies. Show me that.
All right, this is gonna collapse like a marriage soon. Scott, you haven't given us your 360 bird's eye view. Chad Daybell's book, some of them were titled "Living on the Edge of Heaven," "Days of Fury." Lori had become obsessed with the idea that her children were possessed and had become zombies and needed killing in order to, quote unquote, free them. So same question to you. Is she, forget the husband, forget Chad Daybell, but is she mentally ill or simply evil or a combination of both? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to say anybody's evil, and I don't want to say anybody's mentally ill, but they definitely exhibit all the behaviors in their actions, and ultimately, I agree with Fil that the insanity bar is very high. Very, very few in history have gotten that pass. So there's a few high-profile cases that come to mind where you have individuals staking some sort of zombie alien takeover and whatnot. Um, it's a nice excuse. I don't know if they actually believe that, but you have an individual, if you remember a couple of years back, and I believe it was Christmas morning or Christmas Eve in, I want to say Memphis, where an individual goes and takes their RV into downtown district and then blows it up. And some very brave police officers, hearing a very loud audio, get back, leave. This is your last chance. And those early morning police officers arrive on scene. They don't know what to believe, but they see the camper and do everything in their power to get rid of or take out citizens from nearby apartment buildings and some homeless, and succeed. Before that RV had exploded, and even though that person wasn't around to state what their reasons, it ultimately came out through research and whatnot and some good investigative tools that this person had believed the same thing, that they just wanted to blow up the local, I believe it was an AT&T tower, because aliens had taken over that and were going to dominate the world. So it always seems like there's something kind of repackaged, so to speak, of this unimaginable, insane motive, and yet people carry out some horrible misdeeds. So she's definitely, think about it. If I remember seeing a video of her in flip-flops in beautiful Hawaii, and so, their children have been killed, and you do not see that in their faces. What you would want to see in a human being, having not only killed your own child, but then to have killed other loved ones surrounding you, and like you're just going about as if, well, Armageddon or the end of the times is coming, and there I am to save the world. It's mind-boggling. I can't put any rational thought to why they did such a thing or how they did such a thing, and excuse that behavior. It's it is amazing. I don't know what the end of this trial is going to bring about, but it definitely has the earmarks of unimaginable, crazy, but at the same time very evil act behavior. It's just another one.
Tara writes here, new judges are brilliant, up to date with current and new laws followed here. Again, Bob Ross, Pop-Tart. Scott is so calming. That's how he got all these guys to confess. Phil would just wag the finger and get him to confess.
They're all fired. They're all fired up here.
That's good. It's good. Makes for good TV. Someone up here writes, American Princess writes, I have not been following the Daybell case. Don't worry. We're going to be covering it. Basically gavel to gavel. Even if I have to listen to all of that audio, we will cover it. And helping us along the way will be these two gentlemen. The man in the actual Magnum PI Hawaiian shirt is America's most respected Detective Fil Waters. He spent decades in law enforcement. He still has multiple badges, we are learning today. 23 years as a homicide detective in the Houston PD, investigated more than 400 homicides. He is a Marine and the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations, which I hope I never have to hire to track my wife. And he also starred in the show The Investigator. Phil, it could be about anything today. Your closing thoughts on anything related to anything in life. It's a wide open subject today. Life. Your closing thoughts on life.
On life?
Whatever you want.
Well, I would just say it's been an interesting discussion. And I'm reading some of the commentary about some of the things that I've said. And my only response would be, if you don't like the response, or the answer, don't ask the question. Because I will tell you this, and I think people know that I'm straightforward. I'm going to speak the truth, and you can decide whether or not you want to accept it, and that's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I mean, it doesn't bother me. So, and of course, some of them are going to say that that's arrogant. Well, that's fine. I mean, that's fine. I can live with that, and that's okay. But I enjoy the response. I mean, I'm watching this stuff over here, and I enjoy it, and I would just say this: whether you agree with me or not, it doesn't mean that what I have told you today is not true.
Mic drop. Catherine writes, mahalo, guys. Viv writes, Fil is great, and so is Scott. Andy School, this is what makes America America right here. Andy School, summing it up. Fil, I don't disagree with you. Personally, I appreciate all. Oh, I thought he said I disagree with you, but he says I don't. So this is not what makes America America. I take it back. Personally, I appreciate all of your insights as I do Scott's. You're both fantastic, have seen a lot, and so experienced. I think Andy may be in law enforcement, if I remember correctly. Jen Till writes, thanks so much, guys. Happy Friday with the Irish four-leaf clover there, I think it is. So happy St. Paddy's Day. Kara writes, wow, total respect, American flags. At the end of the day, we need to all come together as one and be kind. Louise Rouleau, a friend from Canada, writes, that's why we like Fil, direct answer. Meanwhile,
can I say one more thing?
100%, Fil.
Okay. So those of you that are all twisted about not being able to see this trial on television, or not be able to see trials on television, and I wonder why that just listening to the audio doesn't satisfy your curiosity. And the reason I say that is in 1960, when John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon had their first televised debate, there were people that listened to the debate on the radio. And the people that listened to the debate on the radio, which is about the most impartial way that you can listen to something like that, thought that Richard Nixon had won the debate. For those that watched it on television, saw Richard Nixon's sweating on his upper lip. He was pale. He didn't look comfortable in that setting. And of course, John F. Kennedy, the handsome young guy, charismatic, got up there, and he's a movie star. And those people that watched it thought he won the debate. Not based on substance, based on the symbolism. So that would be one reason why I'm opposed. Another reason why I would be opposed to broadcasting these trials. If you really are interested in the trial for the sake of listening to or experiencing how the justice system works in our country, then listen to it and don't watch it, because you will be affected in a different way.
Very well said. Frankie Figs also said this very well. Smash the like button. I love this comment here from Abby. This is Fil's adopted daughter. We should all meet in Vegas for a surviving con or something. I'm going to work on something like that when I eventually get the time to do it, but we will do something fun. Sensory Combustion says, great show. In part due to the man in the bow tie. That is Agent Scott Duffey. He is now director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He's a retired FBI agent out of Delaware. He worked all kinds of crime matters, including gangs, bank robberies, fugitive task force cases. The list goes on. And prior to that, he served 5.5 years as a Pennsylvania police officer. Scott, your final thoughts on this Friday?
So I'm going to have a couple of drinks. It's St. Paddy's Day. I'll be thinking of all that we discussed today, and yes, we do have a difference of opinion with regards to taping and watching the outcome in a trial. I would say, if it is aired, it would be a whole lot easier to comment on. I'll leave it at that.
Very well said. Julie Frew. Joel, just to remind everyone, we do not have any televised trials in the UK, but we do have them here in America. Apparently, this one will not be televised, although things can change. Louise Rouleau sums it up. That's what life is all about, having fun and be happy. And this person says, Pop-Tart says, Scott, please come back on. Love your demeanor and opinions. And thank you to everyone. Appreciate that very much. A quick programming note. We will be back Sunday night live, 7 p.m. Eastern time with my mom and my co-host. And we are going to be discussing, I believe, the Ellen Greenberg case. She is the young woman, 27 years old, found dead in 2011. She had 20 stab wounds. 10 of those were to the back of her neck and the back of her head. 2 after she stopped breathing. It was ruled a suicide. I've become friendly with her mother, and we are trying to get the attorney for the family to join us this Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. And next week, I think we're going to be back with a really, really interesting episode with the great Dr. Ann Burgess and Dr. Gary Bricado. Details to follow. Follow me at Podcast STS on Twitter. Till then, love you, America. Love you, Boise. Love
Aloha.
you, Hawaii. Love you, Delaware. Love you, Houston.